on you to let me know if things go a bit pear-shaped in terms of my connection. Okay, so the role of the Parent Council, and I'm conscious that people have come on to this because they might not know a huge amount about Parent Councils. And for the origins of Parent Councils, we go back to 2006. Before that, we had school boards. Everybody said that school boards were a bit too formal, and we got some new legislation in 2006, the Parental Involvement Act, which includes within it that every school in Scotland has a parent forum. Now, the terminology got quite confusing because sometimes people thought parent forum was the small group, but the parent forum is all parents and carers who have a child at a school, so it's everybody in that school community. That group can then decide to set up a group to act on their behalf, and that group is the Parent Council. So the Parent Council is a group that's selected by all parents and carers in the school to represent the views of the parents and carers. So it's Parent Forum's the big group, Parent Council is the small group, and you'll note there that I've said selected and not elected. For school boards, we had elections, parents hated them, and that was one of the things that went, and there was a lot more flexibility came with Parent Councils because it's up to the parents in the school, so up to them to decide what kind of group they want to have. And how they want to get the members in place. And I don't think I've known of anybody who has elected anybody. It's all been selection or self-selection or twisting people's arms up their backs to come and get involved. So that's the big group, the small group. So the Parent Council is that smaller group that is selected to work on behalf of others. So as Leanne mentioned earlier, the Parent Council isn't run by the school, it's not run by the head teacher, and it's not run by the local authority. It's run by parents in the school. Now, sometimes head teachers get involved in trying to get a Parent Council off the ground, but once they have that Parent Council off the ground, it's up to that group of parents to then run their own meetings. So it's not up to us, and sometimes parents will, Parent Councils will come to me and say, can you give us a constitution, or can you give us, code of conduct? It's up to the Parent Council to come up with their own way of doing things, because every school's different and they will want to have slightly different things in place. So hopefully that's all clear and we can move on to the next one, Leanne. So there are a few things that the Parent Council must do. So when parents are signing up to this, they need to bear all of these in mind because they're acting on behalf of others. First of all, it needs to operate in an open manner. It's not a closed shop. It's not a group who know what's going on, the inner workings of the school, but nobody else does. It needs to, to operate in a way that there's open communication. So first off, telling all parents and carers who in the school who the members of your Parent Council are and how they can be contacted. And I'm just off a call with a Parent Council where different people have been coming along to meetings and they don't have any maximum number. And I've advised that they want to tighten it up, and so that everybody knows who the core group are and who they can get in touch with and who might get in touch with them to discuss matters relating to the work of the school. So it's about, being very clear, our current Parent Council are these parents and here's how you get in touch with us. So providing a copy of the Constitution to the head teacher. It's not that the head teacher writes the Constitution or that we write the Constitution. I can give you samples, but you would then take that sample and you would come up with your own constitution. And basically what a constitution is a set of rules. So your constitution would include things like how many members you might have, how long people would be on the Parent Council, etc. But we'll show you examples as we go further through. And if I had £1 for every time I've had a call to say, can you provide us with a copy of our constitution? Have you got it on file? Because the parents in the school have lost it. So it's important that you know where that document is, and it should be coming out regularly to actually guide the work of the group. So the other things a Parent Council must do is present a coordinated collective voice through consultation with the Parent Forum. And a lot of the time, this doesn't happen. Our research tells us, national research tells us that the discussion and the communication between the Parent Council and the Parent Forum isn't as good as it should be. And that's the bit that Parent Councils need to get better at, is actually asking everybody in the community, in that school community, for their views, because we can't have a group. So if you have 6 or 7 people in a Parent Council, they can give their thoughts and their perspective on things, but are they necessarily giving the thoughts and the views of a larger group? Possibly not. So, the Parent Council has got a role in actually, setting up strong communication with all parents and carers so that that collective voice is represented back. The bit at the bottom, reporting back to the Parent Forum at least once a year at the AGM, that is the minimum, and that is what is laid down in that Parental Involvement Act, in the legislation that sets up parent councils. But I would suggest that if you're only reporting back to all parents and carers once a year, you're not really doing your job, and that a parent council should be reporting much more frequently, and everybody should know where to find the minutes of meetings, or to find the detail of meetings, or the things that the Parent Council is actually doing in the school should be known to everybody through good, strong communication. But it's a have to do the once a year, and I'm sure that there are people on the call tonight who will have different experiences of that. There'll be good and there'll be less good communication at school level. So parent councils have got a duty to represent their parent forum, and they can be the advocate for all parents in the school, and a great focus group for school staff to let them know what is working and what's not working so well. Over COVID, we had some great examples of that. Lots of parents were contacting the Parent Council about online learning. Was there too much of it? Comments on live lessons, because if parents were working, they couldn't always help their children to tune into live lessons. Parental voice came through quite strongly that they wanted things to be recorded lessons so that they could be accessed later. So that was a really good example of how parent councils were hearing the views, they were seeking the views, and they were feeding back and telling schools, and schools were able to adapt their practice during that COVID lockdown on the basis of comments from a much wider group of people. So it's also a good example there of parents making representation on general matters of concern to either parents or to the Parent Council. One thing a Parent Council cannot do is deal with individual issues. We sometimes have parents turning up at Parent Councils because they have a bit of an axe to grind, or there's an issue that's affecting their family or their child and they want to discuss it. But we are very, very clear that Parent Councils can deal with general matters, not specific matters, and they can't discuss children and they can't discuss staff. So it's important to know that. So, for example, using bullying, parents sometimes come because there's a concern about bullying of their child by another child or children. It's not the business of the Parent Council. They can't discuss that. But what they can do as a Parent Council is talk to the school staff, the head teacher and other staff who are at the meetings about the school's approach to dealing with bullying and the school's anti-bullying policy. And schools will often ask the Parent Council to give input and to give comment on any changes that they make to that policy. So it's good practice for a school to discuss the general approach, and what a Parent Council can do if a parent comes with their own individual concerns is signpost them to the school and tell them where they can go to get help for that specific issue. So it's only general issues that the Parent Council deals with. I've already mentioned that communication is key, and that communication needs to be two-way. For a Parent Council to do its job, it needs to talk to the parents that it represents, and it needs to listen as well to the issues that they would bring back. And a Parent Council needs to find a way to do that, because if it's just chat at the school gate, you only get the views of a few people. If it's on social media, you often get just the keyboard warriors. So it's important that there's ways to gather, and it might be that there's some surveys, a survey monkey of parents, or something you ask the school staff to put out some questions. An example from a recent parent council that I visited in the Govan Hill area, that the parent council were hearing from, you know, lots of parents in their community that they didn't, you know, they had big concerns about school uniform because it was hard to access and it was expensive. So we spoke to them and said, well, you know, you're hearing from a small group of, you know, you're hearing this from, you know, you're telling us there's a lot of people, but it's not the whole school community. So they worked with the head teacher to actually communicate out and ask the entire school community for their views on that topic. They have now taken the information that came from that and they have fed it back. You know, you said, we did. So it's like, you know, that sort of approach. So the two-way communication is absolutely crucial at all times, because too often parent councils are operating as a small group who know what's going on in the school, but nobody else does. Another must do for parent councils is hold an annual general meeting to report to all parents. Now, not every parent is going to come along to the AGM, and we advise a written report, and we've provided templates for parent councils, and parent councils who come along to our training sessions, we had one last week, we can share those documents. So we've come up with a bit of a blueprint of how you can do it. You can then take that document and cut out all the, you know, the examples that we've given and put your own examples into it. And also at that AGM, the parent council should be reporting on all the money that has been raised or has been obtained through applying for grants and what that has been spent on, because if parents have put their hand in their pocket to donate to the school, they need to know what the money is being spent on. And, you know, everybody should have a say in that. So at the AGM, it's all of that reporting, and because you won't get everybody there, make sure that the written report goes to all parents and carers. So some of the roles that we have within a parent council, often difficult to get some of these in place. So, you know, within a parent council, if you've got a dozen members of your parent councils, you would decide then that some people are going to step up and take on these key positions. The chairperson and the vice or deputy chairperson, sometimes people work the role together. They have got a key role. So the chair has got a really key role in pulling meetings together, pulling the agenda together for the meeting, maybe supported by the secretary or the clerk, maybe liaising with the vice chair and doing that. But it's up to them to, you know, to run the meeting and to prepare for the meeting and to make sure that everybody knows ahead you know, what they are going to come along to contribute to. So again, using a real example, I spoke to a head teacher earlier today who was asking about how the meeting should be organised, because there's a meeting happening in the school tonight. The last meeting was 2.5 hours and the head teacher did not see the agenda ahead of time. So either the parent council were disorganised or they were pulling everything together, and she was then hit with a list of about 20 items. There should never be a surprise for a head teacher in turning up to a meeting, and that's where that linkage between the chair and the head teacher in pulling that agenda together, because there'll be school issues that the head teacher will be, and the head teacher has to ask for those to go on the agenda. It's good practice to let the head teacher give an update at every meeting, but it's not a have to, because the meeting doesn't belong to the head teacher. But also, if you know, there's scope there for a head to give an update, but also to answer any questions, but they should be given prior warning of what they're expected to respond to, and not turn up and feel that they're being hijacked by a great big long list of items. So the head teacher isn't a member, they are the principal advisor to the parent council, but it's a partnership. You know, parent councils work in partnership with the school to make things better, to make the whole school experience better for all children and young people within the school. So that's some of those key roles. Secretary clerk, we give money from the council that they can pay somebody to take the minutes. Lots of parent councils don't use it for that. They've got somebody who's willing to take the minutes for free. That's absolutely fine. We don't tell you how to do things, but we give you the means to be able to make the decisions and to have a little bit of finance there to support it. The treasurer is an absolutely key role. And we have an awful lot of messy accounts across the city. So it's important that the treasurer is actually keeping an eye on the money, is doing regular reporting at parent council meetings, but the full parent council is having a discussion about how that money is spent, because the most unhappiness that we get around the city is about the spending of money and parents being unhappy with what the parent council does. So the parent council should be open and transparent and should maybe be asking parents in their school community for what they would be willing to fundraise for. So it's about that, everybody having a role in the communication, but the treasurer must keep an eye on the money, keep an eye on the bank, make sure everything's banked, make sure that receipts are kept, and that reporting is regular, and it's all documented. So that's a really important role. Ordinary members, so parent members, not everybody will have a role. It may be that you join the parent council, you spend the first year or the first 2 years just being a parent who contributes, and maybe once you gain experience you might feel willing to step up and take on one of the roles. It's unusual for somebody to become the chair when they just join. It's not impossible. Sometimes people are quite confident to do that, but usually people would be on for a little bit of time and then they might be willing to step up and take on an office bearer role. Co-opted members are people that you invite to join. So anybody that isn't a parent, because the only people that can be, core members are parents. It's a parent council and the members are parents, but you can decide to co-opt, which basically means invite others to join. So you could have teachers from the school, you could have support staff from the school, you could have people from the community. You wouldn't have your local councillors. They would be invited to come along and give input, but you wouldn't co-opt them onto your parent council. Sometimes if it's a Roman Catholic church, you would have your co-opted church member. So it might be the parish priest or somebody that is suggested by the parish priest to take on that role. So we've got at the bottom there, I think I've probably covered quite adequately that the term parent forum, just remember that that's everybody who has got a child in the school. So parent council finances, and what money do we give to the parent council? Where does it come from? So we, the local authority, provide that you have given us your bank details. We have managed to keep this at 400 annually. I hope that will always be the case. We've managed to do that for quite a number of years now. So if we have your bank details, we know you're an active parent council, then the money is now downloaded in line with the financial year. So the funding is now following that pattern and is downloaded to active parent councils in April. Still get people coming to me, even today, as a parent council, saying, how do we access our money? So we need to get their bank details, and it'll take a little bit of time, but we will get them added onto the system and they will get their funding because they've just, got themselves together again after COVID to be an active parent council. Parent councils also fundraise. That can be a bit of a thorny issue. We would just urge, Leanne and I talk about the cost of the school day a lot. We talk about the pressure that goes on to parents from fundraising. And any parent councils that I'm visiting at the moment, I am advising that they need to be mindful that, parents and carers, nobody's sitting with a lot of surplus funding right now. Is it a case of, can we afford to turn the heating on? Everybody's having that conversation. So against that backdrop, just, have an open conversation at your parent council meeting, talk to school staff, because the school may be doing bits of fundraising, so you don't want to be constantly asking parents. So there might be other ways to do it. You might be able to apply for grants like local area committee grants. We run a separate session on parent council finances that covers all of this, but that's just where the money comes from. Bank interest, well, maybe with the rising interest rates, there might be a little more, but that's not really a sizable bit of income. But these are, that's where your money would be coming in to the account, and the parent council then needs to decide how to spend it. So the decision on how you do spend the money remains with the parent council, or if you've decided that you've got a fundraising subgroup. Lots of PTAs became subgroups because the parent council insurance covered, if it was a subgroup, it covers a subgroup. So if you were a separate PTA, you needed to buy your own public liability insurance, which was probably about £100. But if you become a subgroup, then you are covered by the parent council. So that decision on how the money is spent sits with the parent council. It's not about the school saying, you know, we want you to buy us this or that. It's up to the parents to decide, you know, what they would be happy to buy. However, having said that, you should be buying things that the school actually wants and needs, and you want to try to benefit as many. You know, and the conversation we were having with the Child Poverty Action Group yesterday was around trying to provide experiences for, you know, for children and young people in schools, rather than committing to things that might be difficult to sustain over the longer term, or saying that, you know, we will pay for the primary 7 trip all the time. But, you know, providing experiences that benefit as many as possible. You need to keep some money back for your admin purposes, and remember that, you know, you've got financial responsibility for both raising and spending the money. And, you know, what I would urge you to do is sit down at the start of any year. You know, some of you may already be on parent councils, some might have come to find out, but a good parent council would be sitting down at the start of the year, having an open discussion with the head teacher, with school staff, you know, about the things that the school feels that fundraising would be, you know, would be beneficial for. The parents would then decide, well, yes or no, you know, we might be happy to do X, but not Y. And then you should be letting all parents and carers, so letting your parent forum know what you're fundraising for, so that they know if they're putting their hand in their pocket and they are donating, that they know what that is going to go towards. So again, you know, that good two-way communication also applies to fundraising. So we'll cover this. We have a fundraising session, All Things Money Matters, coming up in a few weeks' time. So we'll go into that in more detail. But that bit about money raised and the understanding it will be spent to benefit the pupils of the school. We've got a few tensions arising in parts of the city where parent councils are raising money and they are buying things like power cards and, you know, and donating to families, or getting schools to subtly do it. Questions are being asked about, you know, how do you benefit from this? And that looks like it's going to benefit families, which is great, you know, if that's working well. But it might be better if actually the money was spent in the school to benefit the pupils, to provide things that, you know, are more obvious in a school context. But that's a decision that, you know, I'm just advising. It's a decision that you need to make at a local level through open dialogue and then communicating to everybody so they know what's happening. So the reporting, you have to report back to all parents on how the money has been spent, and that this is, you know, it's on this sort of topic that things start to go a bit skew with. And I think it's, you know, I'm not saying that there's any fiddles, it's more of a muddle in a lot of places. And it might look like there's money missing, but it's bad reporting and it's bad bookkeeping. And the treasurer maybe not doing the role as they should. So the parent council reports back. You have to do that at least once a year in written format, and somebody external to the parent council needs to look at your accounts. So they would need to look at the in and out book, the receipts, the bank balance, etc., to make sure it all marries up. And you'd be amazed at how many missing receipts and a lack of an in out book I actually discovered as I go around the city. A full report's given to parents on how the money is spent at the AGM, but there should also be regular reporting at the parent council meeting. And if there is that regular slot to know how much is in the bank, how much have we brought in, how much are we spending, where are the receipts, if it's regularly discussed, things won't go wrong quite as often as it does. So you can see at the bottom, you can produce the accounts in several ways. It's highly unlikely that people will do it using accounting software unless it's maybe, you know, you have a treasurer who does that as part of their job. It would usually be in a cash book or an in-out book, maybe using a spreadsheet if people have got those IT skills. But as long as you do it, I don't care how you do it, as long as you do it. So in-out book is absolutely fine, and having a little Polly pocket for all the receipts is perfect.
So that's over to me now, Kathryn.
Yep, handing over to you, Leanne. Sorry about my dog barking in the background.
That's okay. So Kathryn's obviously took you through what a parent council is and who they report to and how they manage their finances. Part of a parent council's duty is also to have certain policies in place. And you'll see on the screen that these are the most important documents that we would suggest parent councils have in place. So the parent council needs a constitution, and I'll go into that in a bit more detail in a second, because the constitution is like the document that officially recognises the parent council as a working group. There's other policies that we would also recommend that they put in place just to cover the parent council on how they would approach certain topics. It also allows you as members of the parent forum to be able to understand how the parent council works if they've got some of these policies in place. And it also allows the parent council members to know the do's and don'ts of being part of that parent council. So you'll see I've got listed here, parent council constitution. That's definitely a necessity that the parent council requires. We would also be expecting them to have a code of conduct, a data protection policy, really important given that a lot of us are all online nowadays. You as parents may be sharing your email address and phone number with the parent council, because sometimes some parent councils will put out a forum to ask for either new members or to ask for email addresses to keep communicating with the wider parent forum. So if they're doing anything like that, they really need to have a data protection policy in place that tells you how they're securely storing that data. And again, I think over the last couple of years, particularly because of COVID and everything went online, many parent councils that weren't already using social media had to rely on social media to be able to communicate with the wider parent forum. So they should really be having a social media policy in place as well. And then a complaints policy, because again, if you as a parent have a complaint about the parent council, there should be a fair process in place to be able to deal with that policy. So just to give you a bit of an understanding of what I mean in terms of a constitution, a code of conduct, because that's the kind of required documents. I'm just going to go through quickly what's included in a constitution, and I'm going to show you a sample constitution of Glasgow City Parents Group, and hopefully it just helps you understand what a constitution is. So constitution is the governance document that lays out the functions of the parent council. It sets out the purpose and the aims and the objectives of the group and how these will be achieved. So it's almost given the group a bit of an instruction on how that group should run. Like I said a few seconds ago, it is a key document that formalises the group, and it's right to be recognised by the school and the local authority. The one thing that the constitution also helps with as well is if the parent council is ever applying for funding, chances are they will be required to give a copy of their constitution, because like it says there, it formalises the group. So there are certain aspects of grants that parent councils can apply for, and the first thing they would be asked for is a constitution. The same if they were opening up a new bank account, they would be asked if you got a copy of constitution. So the constitution itself is created by the parent council. However, it needs you guys as the parent forum to agree to it, to say yes, that you're happy with that constitution. So what would normally happen is a parent council would either create their constitution or they would update it. When it comes to the AGM, a copy of that constitution should be getting sent out to all parent forum, all of the parent forum, whether that's through social media, through email, getting shared through the head teacher, whatever way is suitable. And then that allows any member of the parent forum to look at that constitution, check if they're okay with the wording. If there's anything there that you think isn't worded right, you have a right to then question that. For the most part, the constitutions are generally same, very much the same across the board with some slight tweaks. This shouldn't really be anything too radical within the constitution. And what I would normally do, like for instance myself, if I was sending it out and asking for the parent forum to review that, the best practice would be the parent council themselves would make those suggested changes, and that would be marked on the constitution so that you as a parent can clearly see where these suggested changes would take place. That would be sent out with the AGM agenda, and if you wanted to discuss that, then you would need to attend the AGM, and at the AGM a vote takes place if everybody's happy to take on those changes in the constitution, and it's either a yay or a nay. So that's why it's really important that when you see that AGM invite come out from your school, it's actually really useful for you to attend. The AGM not only gives you an idea of what the Parent Council's been doing for the past year and what they've been spending their funding on and what discussions have taken place, but you can also have input into their policies, their constitution, and some of those office bearer roles that Kathryn went through. Then you can vote on that and select them as well. So it's really important that we've got the parents and carers inputting into that. So the constitution is needed by the Parent Council to help them function and to help them define how they function. It also ensures that they're compliant with the legislation as defined in the Parental Involvement Act that Kathryn went through at the beginning of the slides. And it clearly defines the role and remit of the Parent Council, so it kind of keeps them right on what they should be doing. And it lays out a clear and consistent process for when conflicts or difficulties arise. So it takes that kind of personal aspect out of it, because what you normally find with some parent councils, if they don't have all their policies in place, some of these decisions always land on the chairperson's lap to make. And sometimes that can feel quite personal if that chairperson's having to kind of make an on-the-spot decision. But if they've got really robust and up-to-date policies, the chairperson doesn't have to make that decision as such. They would just follow the policy that would guide them in the right way. And your constitution, again, I'm just going to quickly run through this. It should cover how many members you have in your parent council, how long members be on the parent council, because again, if you're at your school and you see that your parent council chairperson has been on that parent council for like 8 years, 10 years, I would probably be asking, is this person continuously being voted on and being selected by the parent forum, or are they just kind of continuing to do it because nobody else does it, or are they not allowing anybody else to get the opportunity? Because really you want that fresh turnaround at times as well, so that there's some fresh ideas coming in. So you're probably looking at parent council office roles being reviewed yearly or every 2 years. It's fair enough if the person gets voted back into it. There's nothing you can do with that if that's what people select, but it just gives other people an opportunity to step up, and it also just gives an opportunity of changing those roles if required. Constitution also talks to how you select and elect members, and the same with the co-opted members. It would also describe how the subgroups work, like the PTA that we mentioned earlier. It also talks about how often the parent council would meet and how to deal with poor attendance at meetings or conduct in meetings. And this is just an example. So then hopefully some of that stuff I've explained kind of resonates in your head a wee bit. So you'll see our constitution's got our group name at the top. It's got some of our aims. So that keeps us right. So everything we do should follow those aims. We shouldn't be going off on a tangent and doing stuff that's really not relevant. And then it talks about the number of members that we should have. So you definitely need to have like a minimum amount of members, I would say, for a functioning parent council. Talks about the subgroups. In our group, we hand out IT equipment to some of our committee members to help them attend meetings. That's not always the case with parent councils. we don't have a bank account with Glasgow City Parents Group because everything we do is generally free. We don't really need to be fundraising and take money in. And then the AGM. I think I've only got 2 more slides to get through. The Code of Conduct, another important document. This is more your do's and don'ts. So it gives a clear definition of the expected behaviour, because one thing we hear regularly from Parent Forum members is, I don't want to join my parent council because I think it's quite cliquey. I don't feel welcomed, I don't feel supported, so I'm just not going to bother joining. It shouldn't be that type of environment. I mean, it should really be a welcoming group for all to attend, and all are welcome. And that's where the Code of Conduct is really useful then, because the Code of Conduct will just tell you how people should behave in meetings, what we should do and what we shouldn't do. And if there's any breaches in that code, then like, how is that resolved? So again, this is just a wee example of what's included in a Code of Conduct. So this is the Glasgow City Parents Group Code of Conduct. So things like, you should feel that the work makes a difference to the school community, we treat everybody equal, we're respectful, we get involved wherever possible. And then what we shouldn't do is discuss confidential issues outside of meetings, discuss personal issues. So if you remember, a parent council cannot advocate for individual parents, they have to advocate on behalf of the parent forum or a larger group of parents. We shouldn't post on social media any negative content or abuse towards our group of members. That's probably quite a standard statement from a lot of parent councils, because parent council social media definitely should not be a kind of melting pot for parents to air their grievances. If you have a grievance with the school, you're better contacting the school directly and speaking to them about it. Because I'm sure even yourself, if someone had an issue with you, your work, maybe the way you spoke to them or act to them, then you would rather they'd probably come and speak to you directly about it so you can clear the air instead of speaking about it on social media. But the Code of Conduct basically just gives you some do's and don'ts. It helps your members to understand what the expectation is of being part of a parent council. And the same with the meetings. Obviously, a huge part of parent councils is holding regular meetings. So for that parent council to be successful and to be able to move forward and to be able to action things and do the fundraising and make a difference, you really need a bit of commitment to attend meetings. Now, some parent councils only meet once a term. Some meet once every 6 weeks, some meet monthly. It's all different depending on your parent council. But one thing I would say, whilst this all sounds really formal, this information that we're sharing, ultimately a parent council is just a group of volunteer parents who want the best for their school and the pupils within that school. The meetings are generally quite informal. Whilst they will have an agenda that they need to follow, that's more to do with like trying to keep to the time of the meeting, so the meeting doesn't go on for too long. And whilst they might take minutes of the meetings, again, that's just so then those minutes can be shared wider, and so that the general parent forum know what's happened in that meeting, and also so that if any actions are decided or any decisions are made, then it's recorded so that you can go back and check that. That all sounds very formal, but the bottom line is the parent council meeting, it's not as formal as you think. It's just everybody's wanting the best for their school, and like Kathryn said, they're basically a focus group for that wider school forum for all you guys to kind of put forward things that they hear from you as parents, things that maybe are discussed in the playground, things they maybe pick up through social media. And if there's like a common issue, or if the school needs support in anything, then that's what the parent council is for. So on the screen just now, you'll see our social media details if you don't already follow us. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're very active. We're on YouTube. Like I said, we record webinars like this and we add them up to YouTube. We don't record our parent council training. and we don't record things like focus groups and stuff, but anything like this where the information isn't sensitive and we can share it, they're all on there. So there's plenty of videos for you to catch up on. And if anybody's got any questions or concerns about joining the parent council, or maybe you're not even sure if your school has a parent council and you don't know how to reach them, then feel free to take a note of our email address. You can contact me at any time. Kathryn will tell you I am on call 24/7 almost with this, even though I do have a day job. I do devote a lot of time to this group, and I will always help wherever I can. I will always try and signpost you and direct you and advise you in the best way possible.